The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
All right. Hello and welcome to the first Quality in Action webinar for 2011. Happy New Year to everyone. We have lots of people registered for today's webinar and some are still getting signed on here. But welcome to everyone. We're excited to honor National Mentoring Month and also be focused on talking about how do we recruit more male mentors. So I am April Reardon. I am the Director of Training and Community Partnerships with the Mentoring Partnership of Minnesota. We are excited to be able to offer this monthly webinar series. It's been extremely popular in trying to bring some research and also just other ideas from the field of how we can increase the quality in our programs and put that into action. Just some logistics for everyone to know. We do encourage you to ask questions and participate during the webinar, share your comments, and some ways to do that. We realize that people are participating in different ways. So one option is that you can raise your hand. If you see that in your control panel, that's an option, and then I can unmute you and you can speak live during the webinar and ask your question or make your comment that way. Probably a more popular way. We'd like to have better balance there, but another way to do that is just to go to the question section of your control panel and you can type those questions and comments into that section. Some of you have already asked some, kind of logistical questions, and I can respond to you directly that way. Or if it's something that, is contributing to the conversation, and then we'll share those. And we do have a panelist who will be presenting. I'll introduce her in a moment, but then, it might not be that I share it right away, but I'll wait for a break and share your comment or our question at an appropriate time. Just a note too that if you do raise your hand and get unmuted to monitor that background noise, we have a way of seeing where the background noise might be coming from too, so we might take care of that for you as well. The slides for the webinars are available on slideshare.net. You'll also see a link to this, the address for that at the end of the webinar. We also send a follow-up email, so you'll get that direct link to where you can find the slides for the presentation there. There's also lots of resources, particularly for this one. I have a ton of resources and websites available at the end of the slide, so you also have an easy way to get that, so I wouldn't worry about writing all of those down while you're participating. And we also are hosting recordings of past webinars, so today's webinar will be up by next week on our Facebook page via the Files tab. Just wanted to try, since we're talking about the logistics a little bit, and have you practice maybe raising your hand. So if you have a microphone or telephone access where you could raise your hand and speak on today's webinar, if you could just raise your hand, and we'll see if everybody is able to do that. I'll look through here. Just a few of you, not a ton. All right, and so that's just so everybody else has a chance to try the raising your hand. If you are only able to, you're just listening to the webinar, and the only way you are sharing questions and comments is through that question panel where you could type them in, if you could raise your hand. Make sure you can find that spot. All right. And it might be that some of you are just listening too and aren't necessarily accessing any of the controls, and that's an option as well. All right, I'm going to put all the hands down and keep moving. So like we said, this is 2011 National Mentoring Month. The theme this year is Help Them Get There. But National Mentoring Month was created by the Harvard School of Public Health and Mentor, the National Mentoring Partnership. It's celebrating its 10th anniversary this year and focuses on focuses national attention on the need for mentors, as well as how each of us, looking at individuals, businesses, government agencies, nonprofits, faith communities, everyone can work together to increase the number of mentors. It's really a big recruitment campaign, working with national media, so you'll see PSAs, and maybe you've already accessed some of those pieces, heightening the awareness of mentoring and trying to get individuals to volunteer. And those things come from the Harvard School of Public Health. Mentor, the National Mentoring Partnership, works with the campaign's local partners, which often is the state mentoring partnerships and other organizations, to organize special events or to direct that local media, and really helping adults learn how to become mentors and turn that concern for young people into that action. And the Corporation for National and Community Service promotes the month to all of its Senior Corps, AmeriCorps, Learn and Serve America, and highlights it during the Martin Luther King Day of Service. I wanted to make sure everybody has seen where to go for some of those resources. The Mentoring Partnership of Minnesota, for those of you who are in Minnesota programs, to find out some of the resources that are available through us. You can go to our website, and there are all of our posters and Thank Your Mentor Day cards and recruitment cards and things have already been claimed, but I think there are still bookmarks available. But in addition to that, there are items that you can download. So here's some kind of a resource collection of things that we've put together. There's also, you can click here to see what materials are available. So yeah, it looks like bookmarks are the only ones that are still available. Everything else is sold out. They're free, but sold out. But there's all of these different materials, PSAs, e-cards, recruitment postcards, advertisements, and things that you can customize and use to support recruitment efforts in your own community. So just in the chance that you haven't seen those things or been able to look at them and access them, to make sure you know that those things are available. This is what you're looking at now, is the National Mentoring Month page. A lot of the same resources are there, but if you happen to be from another state, you might be able to find who your local campaign partner is. There's also news and events here. And then Mentor put out them in a Mentor Minute this week, but some news that this week, just yesterday, President Obama proclaimed January as National Mentoring Month. So it's a nice piece to look at, and there are lots of communities who've been able to have their mayors declare January as National Mentoring Month in their cities, or governors and different places. So an example of another way to draw attention to that need for mentors and to celebrate National Mentoring Month. I did want to ask, as we move forward here, and you can, again, raise your hand and just talk with us, or type in the question area, and I can share what you're doing in your local community or with your program to celebrate National Mentoring Month. I'll give you a moment to plug those in. Just to describe to us what you're planning to do or have already done. All right, Roxanne, I'm going to unmute you so you can share with us. Hi, Roxanne. Well, let me try Mary Beth. Mary Beth, did you want to share what you're doing for National Mentoring Month? I have two hands raised here, Roxanne and Mary Beth. All right, I'm going to go ahead and mute those and look back to the questions instead. So Jenna is doing on January 13th a Take Your Mentee to Work event. Also balloons at work for all mentors. Mary Beth, who had her hand raised, but newspaper articles and a radio spot to promote a training. Also saw somebody else doing newspaper ads, thanking volunteers via local radio stations. Those are all great ideas. Let's see, press releases sent out with profiles of waiting kids who are waiting for mentors, and they have a display up in their community at the clinic, at the bank, and at the senior center. All right, great ideas. Any other, let me see, there's another hand up. All right, great. And any other ideas that you wanted to include or send our way, but those are just a sense of some of the things that people are doing to celebrate National Mentoring Month. Throughout the campaign, and each year since its launch in 2002, National Mentoring Month has enjoyed support of the United States President and Congress, and also many prominent individuals. So you see here, Maya Angelou, former President Bill Clinton, Clint Eastwood, Senator John McCain, Quincy Jones, Colin Powell, who's really a spokesperson for National Mentoring Month, Cal Ripken Jr., Bill Russell, Usher, and I think it's no accident that all but one of these individuals that have really been featured by the National Mentoring Month campaign are men. So we have a couple polls. I'm going to launch the first poll, and this question is just asking you, most mentors in my program are, and you can choose, are they men, women, or an equal balance of men and women? We've got about 10 more seconds for everybody to have a chance to vote. Then I will share with you the results. Okay. And you can take a look. So it looks like 75% of those of us who are participating in this webinar say that most of your mentors in your program are women. It's a good chunk of you who have a nice equal balance, and I'm sure we're all interested in knowing about the 7% who say most of their mentors are men. All right, I'm going to hide that poll, and we have one more poll to follow that up. To say, and this one's asking, so most mentees on my waiting list, who are they? So are most of the mentees on your waiting list girls, boys, an equal mix, or you don't have a waiting list of mentees? So again, I'll give that a few seconds. This is interesting, okay. All right, a couple seconds and I'm going to close here. All right, and now I'll share. So nobody participating in this webinar has a waiting, a higher percentage of girls on their waiting list than anybody else, but it looks like 42% boys, 32% an equal mix, and then a big chunk that does not have that mentee waiting list. So that's interesting. But again, most of you say that you have more boys on your waiting list than girls. In addition, that most of us have more women as mentors than we do men, which is, again, so looking at those National Mentor Month supporters, and sort of no accident that most of those spokespeople have been men, is probably calling attention to this issue, which is also why you are here today. All right, so I'm going to introduce now our panelist. We have Amber Troupe from Mentor Michigan. Amber is the director of Michigan's statewide mentoring partnership, Mentor Michigan, which is housed at the Michigan Community Service Commission. She has been the lead staff person on this initiative for over 5 years. I had the pleasure of meeting her in person at a gathering of mentoring program trainers in Pittsburgh. And prior to coming to the commission, Amber served as an AmeriCorps member, coordinated a Girls on the Run program in West Michigan, and supported a small community-based mentoring program. So has lots of experience that many of you can probably relate to in talking about this. So, and what Amber's going to share with us is, and I'm going to flip over to a presentation of hers, is Michigan spent some time creating a Men in Mentoring toolkit, and it's really a toolkit and looking at how do we do a better job and recruit more male mentors, really looking at that issue that the polls really showed us. And so I'm going to flip over to that presentation and we can hear from Amber. Thank you so much for taking time to share the toolkit with all the programs in Minnesota.
It's my pleasure, April. Thanks for having me. Just while you're getting that PowerPoint loaded, I'll just add a few comments before we dive into the PowerPoint. And I think the issues related to men in mentoring that we've researched and tried to address here in Michigan are really issues that everybody's facing across the country. And based on that, those couple quick poll questions, we know you understand the issue and are facing the same challenges. And April, I can't see the attendee list, but my guess would be that the majority of the attendees today are female as well. Is that correct?
I'm just looking through. I think we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah, 7 of 37 participants are men. So that's actually not a bad. That's actually a better percentage than we sometimes would expect. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true, but it's also still quite low, and that's what we experience with most of our mentoring program staff here in Michigan too. We're actually very fortunate at our mentoring partnership to have a male staff member, and he's helped lead a lot of this work along with a group of men throughout the state that have helped us develop these tools. But I always think it's great to hear this presentation from the male perspective, but I think I can do a good job of delivering it as well, because I know that I can relate to most of you as women in the mentoring field that are trying to ensure that not only are you serving the young girls in your communities, but that you're also addressing the need for boys to be served by male mentors. So just a brief overview before we really get into the content of this toolkit. I wanted to give you just a very brief overview of the toolkit and how it was developed. We were actually fortunate enough to receive a grant from the W.K. Kellogg Foundation, and through this grant, Mentor Michigan was able to engage several mentoring programs from around the state in what we called our Men in Mentoring campaign. And through this campaign, we really aimed to give these mentoring programs very specific and dedicated resources to focus on male mentor recruitment and to help us identify some promising strategies that can help us recruit, and then also, equally as important, retain male volunteers. So this campaign, in conjunction with some other partnerships and research, it really helped us develop this toolkit that we'll introduce you to today. The toolkit itself is broken down into several components, and it comes in several formats. And we can't get into all of it today, but the component that we're going to focus on is the complete recruitment message. Another way to think about that is the core components of a message that are necessary to attract male volunteers. In addition, we have developed a variety of talking points that are designed to give you some strategic language depending on your audience, and we'll explore a few of those examples today. Like I said, the toolkit itself comes in several formats. First, you'll find PDF documents which contain the strategies that I'll refer to, targeted language, talking points, and other tips. And then the entire toolkit is also in an audio podcast format. So you can play this on your computer, you can burn it to CDs, you could transfer it to, say, your iPod and listen to it while you're working out. And then finally, there's a modified version of this presentation also available that can be utilized kind of in a train-the-trainer format so that you can easily take this information and utilize it when you're training the individuals that are your mentor recruiters. So ultimately, our goal today is to introduce you to this toolkit and provide you with some training on how to utilize this resource. Like I said, we won't be able to cover all of the contents, so we're just going to focus on the components of the complete recruitment message, but it'll give you a really good introduction on how to use this resource. And then just to emphasize again, too, the audio podcasts that we have, I think are a tremendous resource because to hear the tone and the way somebody presents this information is very different than reading it. So it's also a great resource when you're looking at this too. So what you see here are several components that make up a complete recruitment message. And we'll spend most of our time breaking down each of these components and then trying to provide some examples along the way. As we're talking about these issues, keep in mind that all of the language, tips, and examples that we discuss have been specifically targeted and refined to appeal to male audiences. But it's also important to remember that this isn't necessarily a one-size-fits-all approach. So you may find that your target audience responds better to some of the messages than others, but generally speaking, the strategies that you'll see here are effective even when the specifics do change.
Amber, I have one more poll that I will launch before you move on to the next piece.
Great.
All right. So I'm just going to launch that one and let everybody see it. So a question about what's the most effective strategy for recruiting male mentors? We'll see what everybody thinks. I have a feeling they'll be right. This is pretty funny. Okay, I'm going to close and share. Should be no surprise here. We've got
Hey, good job.
I know, we have a smart group. It doesn't mean that these other ideas are bad ideas, but yeah, I think this is the thing that Amber said was, you know, an overwhelming theme or overwhelming truth from the work.
And I know the capacity of mentoring organizations is so tight, and so we're always looking for the most effective way to do recruitment, and quite often it seems like those group presentations would be the best use of your time, but ultimately those are not the things that are delivering the volunteers to your program. So it's really the one-on-one ask, and that's why I think you'll find the components of this toolkit so useful, because it really does break down some very specific talking points for each audience. And before I go any further, I just want to say April will direct you later to where you can download all of this. All of it's available on our website, and I believe April's posted some links to it as well. So we'll make sure you know exactly where to get you where you can go to get all of this information that I'm referring to. Okay, so before we get into the components, it's helpful to make some more general observations. So first, when you're recruiting volunteers, ultimately what you're doing is you're making a sales pitch. You're trying to sell this person, this recruit, on mentoring and your program. So it may be beneficial to keep in mind some general marketing techniques. So for example, it's important to start with a broad, non-committal language and then move towards increasingly more personal and more persuasive conversation. Then think about your recruitment in terms of some basic sales principles. You'll likely have to overcome some objectives, and then at the end you'll have to close and seal that deal. And then if you know you have a viable candidate and they express interest, be perceptive. Someone who says maybe could potentially benefit from, say, attending a group event to see that mentoring may not be as threatening as they may think it is, and that they are fully capable of being a mentor. if their answer is yes, then don't let that yes fall through the cracks. Make sure you get that paperwork started. Make it a priority, and be sure to communicate with the prospective mentor throughout the process. Quick follow-up is really important. Second, it's really important to help men look into their own lives. So focus on the man himself rather than on some broad issues. If you use statistics, help make them personal by using examples from your program or perhaps even examples from that man's own life. Discuss how their unique personal traits and abilities could result in a positive outcome for a young person. What's really important is that the men want to know that they're able and ultimately will succeed in this relationship. And then finally, in order to do some of this, you're going to have to be conversational and you're going to have to listen. We've all been on the receiving end of a bad sales pitch, the type that maybe makes you feel like your needs are trivial. So say, for example, you're shopping for a new TV and you tell the salesman that you're looking to spend no more than a few $100s, but he takes you to those big 50 or 60-inch flat screen TVs that are selling for $1,500. And that's not what you're looking for, and that's not who we want to be when we're trying to sell mentoring to our prospective volunteers. And listening is important for a few more reasons too. So first, because we should be genuinely interested in the volunteers in our program. Volunteers are our partners in the work that we do, and it's important to value their voice. When we listen, we might be able to pick up on things that can help us be better recruiters. If that man had a strong male example in his life, you could appeal to that. And if he didn't, you could also appeal to that, but in a different way. And then finally, don't forget to make that personal ask and close the deal. So, you know, flat out make the ask. Find out when they're willing to become a mentor. So for those of us that have spent some time in the mentoring field, we know how great the need is for male mentors. You guys clearly expressed that in the poll. And as a result, it's easy for us to kind of take this need for granted as an assumption. But we need to remember that these potential volunteers aren't likely to have that background knowledge that we have. And they may not know how many young men in their community could benefit from a mentor. And they also may not know what the benefits of a mentoring relationship may be, not only for the mentees, but for the mentors. So the first step to recruiting men is establishing awareness. So what is mentoring? Why is it important? And what does it have to do with me? Over the next few slides, we're going to present a few examples, and the language that you will see in here is designed to kind of establish a basic level of awareness. And you'll notice that we will be utilizing a few very important resources that should be easily available to your program, some statistics and some stories. And you'll also notice how we break down these things as important, but we also pair these statistics with stories in a way that hopefully makes them a bit more effective. So here's an example that you might see if you were speaking to a male audience or an audience that has men in it. So this is an example specifically from Michigan, but I'm sure April could help you insert some statistics from Minnesota, or you could come up with some statistics from your individual program. So statewide, there are more than 35 children waiting to be matched with a mentor. In our program, we have 125 waiting for someone like you. That may sound like an enormous problem that you cannot solve, but let me tell you how you can make a difference. Kyle is an 8-year-old boy in our program, growing up without a dad or a positive male role model. His mother works 2 jobs, and he really needs a mentor in his life. Becoming Kyle's friend puts us another step closer to our goal and makes a big difference for him.
Just to put that in perspective then too, I mean, according to our 2007 prevalence, just for the Minnesota programs, the actual number of kids reported, and this was with just 92 programs responding, was nearly 9,000 kids waiting. That did include one program that reported a 5,000 youth waiting list. So even if we take that out of the mix, it ends up being about 3,900.
Wow.
All right, I'm going to move you forward. Sorry.
No, you're fine. So my computer actually just kind of went into sleep mode, so it gave me a second to unlock. But you know,
okay,
yeah,
good.
and just to echo April's point, at the beginning, some of you stated that you don't keep a waiting list, and you know, you can talk about that in a variety of ways. I know some of our programs here in Michigan, especially with boys, do not keep a waiting list because they know their need for male mentors is so great that if they take a kid and put them on the waiting list, there's a chance that some kids are going to age out of their program before they would have the opportunity to match them. So, you know, it kind of use what information you have and what's most relevant to your program to kind of state the case. So the next example in an individual setting that you could use, and this is kind of a similar conversation but in a one-on-one setting, and you know, notice how we try to make these statistics personal, that Kyle isn't just a number, that he's a person with real needs, and that makes a lot more sense than simply just using numbers. So in this example, we are working to connect 125 kids right here in our community, these kids who really need someone like you in their lives. We have a boy named Kyle in our program. He has been waiting a year for a mentor. He could use someone like you just to hang out with him for an hour a week, just being his friend. He would grow so much from spending time with someone like you. So we try to use a story that you know, is presented clearly and in a way that's not overwhelming or intimidating to the volunteer. It's a simple story about a real young person in your program. And there's multiple examples like that in the toolkit. So moving on to awareness, a couple things to emphasize. First, you know, and you can hear this better through the audio podcasts if you listen to them on the website, but you can see how the tone and the language changed from the group setting to the individual setting, and also how we use those statistics. So we worked from the big picture down to one specific example, and then we had some local and statewide statistics that we started with, and then narrowed down our focus again to that one child in the program. So it helps establish how large the need is, but it doesn't make it make the need feel so big or so overwhelming. You're bringing it down in a way that allows them to see how they can specifically address that need. And then we tried to make those statistics personal by talking about Kyle and not just saying a number and talking about somebody in the local community. On this slide, you can see a few examples of the talking point templates that the toolkit provides related to awareness, and these talking points were designed to hopefully assist your mentor recruiters in more informal situations and conversations. So it just gives you a way to kind of, again, state the cause and talk about what the need is. I think so many of our programs here have found, you know, just equipping their volunteers or their recruiters or their board members with some simple language has made those volunteers so much more effective. And then the next slide, we have a few more talking points. I won't read every example to you, but 4 out of every 10 families are led by a single parent. That leaves a lot of children, especially boys, without someone to look up to during those critical years when they are growing up to be men. So trying to frame these things by stating the need and really identifying with your male volunteers. And then we talk about the role of stories. You know, we keep emphasizing how important it is to make the statistics personal. And when we're taking that concept further, we want to talk about stories as well. These stories really help lay the groundwork for empathy and understanding, and it's important to use stories so that the men you're trying to recruit understand how mentors can make a difference. And often the most successful stories are those personal stories of potential recruits. So look for those opportunities to help men look into their own lives and then maybe discover who their mentors were, or in some cases were not. And this requires sensitivity. So remember, not all of your potential recruits will have had that type of man in their lives. And even in those situations, it still may be possible to use the potential recruits' own life experiences to help them understand the importance of mentoring. There are also a few key things to consider when selecting your story or stories that you're going to use. We found that it's important to highlight people outside of the home and the family so that it's clearly established what that role of a mentor is and how that's different from the role of, say, a father, a grandfather, or an uncle, because we want to avoid confusing those recruits with terminology that could potentially indicate that more time and commitment is required than what is actually expected. And, you know, we all know mentors are not replacement fathers, they're friends. So you may want to consider the terminology like role model. In some areas in Michigan, this language has been more negative than positive, because it can also overstate the role of a mentor. We know that mentors obviously do become role models, but introducing that term during recruitment has shown to have some potential drawbacks as well. And then also, when you think about stories to use, you may want to consider stories from your own life, success stories in your program, or young men who are on your waiting list. And when possible, try to use an example from the potential volunteer's own life. So did he have a coach or a teacher or a pastor that he looked up to? And how did that person impact his life? Ask him, could he envision being the type of person he is today without that person in his life? And if he didn't have that type of person, how did that impact him as well? You know, I think as we walk through each of these things, it continues to show the importance of these being one-on-one asks, because if you're not in a setting that can be conversational, you're not going to have the opportunity to utilize some of those experiences from that potential volunteer in order to recruit them in a way that is meaningful to them. So as we saw under the awareness component, there are some specific examples in the toolkit that you might utilize based on who your audience is. So there are examples like this one for group settings. So how often do we take a moment to look at the people who shaped our lives? Think for a moment, who were those important men that influenced you? And now imagine taking them away. That's what life is like for many of the young men in our program. So that's a way you can get people in a group setting to start reflecting on those things. But then there's also examples of how you can do that in those one-on-one conversations. So I don't know about you, but I was surrounded by lots of great role models. I had great coaches and teachers. How about you? Did you have an important man in your life that you could look up to? And again, there are specific talking points that you can utilize. So comfort, this is an interesting one. Getting men comfortable with the idea of mentoring really requires addressing any fears that the men may have head on. And we've learned that even though men may not say it, it's common for men to be concerned that they don't have the right skills to be a good mentor, or that a mentoring relationship may not succeed. So be aware that this may be on the minds of potential recruits, and men need to be assured that they already possess the skills and the characteristics they need to make a difference in the life of a young man. Mentors are friends, and every guy has the ability to be a friend to a child. So look for ways to emphasize this important point in the stories that you use or in the stories that recruits might share with you. Men must also understand that the most important quality they bring to the table is themselves, and their own unique personality, interests, and hobbies are so important. In the very beginning of this presentation, we emphasized the importance of listening and being conversational. And so again, use the information that's available to you as a result of listening to help show these individuals that they already have what it takes. And the fact that they're willing to listen and consider becoming a mentor demonstrates that they're ready to be a mentor themselves.
I was just going to mention, this is April, that there's a book called Men on a Mission, and I know I looked at that, and it follows men in all kinds of volunteer settings where they're volunteer, kind of what gets men to volunteer, and highlighting that they're drawn to mentoring drawn to volunteering with young people, but that it also highlighted that they do tend to already have these inherent skills that help with building those relationships, sort of not feeling like they have to push the conversation or get too personal right away, that they give it that time to build trust, and and that there's some ways, and I know working with at least one program in Minnesota and sharing some of that information and thinking about how can you use that for your recruitment to remind men of some of the skills that they already have, or that the fact that instead of associating it so much with nurturing or like counseling or things like that, that there are other things that that they already have the skills to do. So.
Right, and throughout this toolkit, we were very selective when we created these talking points to use language that would make them comfortable, because there, I think, are a lot of misconceptions that men have about what a mentor is, what a role model is, and this fear that they don't have what it takes. And so we've tried to break it down in a way that's very non-threatening and allows these volunteers to understand that they do have the skills and that it's not as hard as they think it's going to be, and that we break it down in a way that's comfortable and easy. So on the next slide, there's a few examples of talking points that you can consider using when you're trying to establish comfort. Notice how the role of a mentor is addressed. Mentoring is about, and kind of, go from there. But one of the challenges related to engaging men in mentoring relationships is helping men understand what mentors and mentees actually do together, like we were saying. And how many of you have you heard that before? What am I going to do with a kid for a whole hour a week? And if mentoring is an unfamiliar concept, this can be a really uncomfortable question. So be prepared ahead of time with some specific suggestions, like the one you see here. Mentoring is often as uncomplicated as, and fill in the blank. We'll talk about some issues of success directly in a minute, but just look at how the final point explains success in really simple terms, that it's the moment you become a mentor. We found men want to be successful, and they want to know that they can be successful in this mentoring relationship. How are we doing on time, April? Okay. So,
I forgot I had muted myself. Sorry. I was just saying.
That's okay.
I was chatting away. Well, we have 15 minutes, and but I think I'll just encourage people, if you have questions or things that you would like, we'll just keep moving through. There's not too much left here, and then but do mention those questions, and I'll jump in with those as we go along. Okay.
Okay. So I'm sure many of you have been volunteers yourself, and as volunteers, we always appreciate when we're told exactly what's expected of us in our volunteer role. And so our volunteers really deserve to know that up front, and we want them to feel that we're giving them everything that they need in order to get this job done, and that we're preparing them in a way that's appropriate and we're clear about the expectations. So whether or not they ask you directly or not, the men will be wondering, what do you expect from me? So, here's some language that you can use, and there's some very clear talking points as well in the toolkit, but we're asking for 1 hour a week for 1 year because we know that young men who have that type of relationship are more likely to become successful men themselves. And providing this type of clarity will empower men to make the right choice for them. A clear lesson that we're learning in Michigan is that, not every candidate is a viable candidate. And for a variety of reasons, some men simply aren't ready to be mentors. And we know that's the case for some potential female volunteers as well. So there is a need for balance. But here's another example. Here in Michigan, obviously our economy has been kind of rough and we've lost a lot of jobs, which has had some interesting impacts on volunteering as well. And some people who have found themselves unexpectedly unemployed have found fulfillment by volunteering, but other people who were vitally involved in their communities have had to relocate and leave the state as a result of job loss. So there are several other reasons why qualified recruits may not be able to commit to being mentors, and there may be some recruits who simply aren't qualified. So there's a lot of things to take into consideration. So you want to paint a clear picture that doesn't scare candidates away. Mentoring isn't scary. We know that. That's why we're all in this work. Men can be great mentors just by being themselves, and there is a time commitment, but we can work with those volunteers to help figure that out. But on the other hand, we've got to make sure we're clear about that commitment so we can identify if that recruit is really serious about working with a young person based on your individual program requirements. So just being really clear about the expectations.
Amber, I do have questions. Esther, if you have the audio, I can just let you ask your question. I'll unmute you for a moment here. All right. Esther, did you want to ask that question? Maybe not. You are unmuted. All right, I'll go ahead and ask the question for her. She said, does all of this apply to all ages of men? And if not, are there specific ways that are more appropriate for approaching different age groups to mentor?
Yes, I think there's different resources for a variety of different circumstances, and we'll address that on a future slide, but we do break down our toolkit in a variety of ways, and we customize the talking points based on audience. So we do talking points for recruiting younger men, and we do talking points for recruiting older men. And then we also have like women recruiting men, for people recruiting in the faith-based setting, so a pastor or a Bible study leader, employers, etc. So yes, I think there is a difference.
And another question, and this probably ties in, there was somebody who asked for if any attendees would be willing to share contact information for networking. I'm not quite sure how to easily do that. Maybe you can shoot me an email if you're interested in sharing your information with others who are on the webinar, and I can try to coordinate that. But I also changed one of the options on the control panel so you can look at the attendee list and see who's here. So that's one piece. But kind of along with that then, I imagine some of the networking would be about this question of where or how do you find men to approach through a one-on-one conversation, and if anybody has suggestions about where or how to advertise to make that initial contact. And we can keep moving to because we're getting to that, up to that point about making the ask, but anything that through this process that that you've come up with.
Yeah, we've all been looking for the magic answer to that question, someplace where we can go and we kind of hit the jackpot of all these great male mentors. But, that's why we've broken down the talking points in some of the ways that we have, because we have been really successful in getting a champion at a local business or a company to allow us to come in and talk to volunteers, and so program staff can take some of these talking points and go in and also arm that that business leader who is allowing you to come into their corporation, arming them with some talking points, so as an employer they can talk to their male employees, and maybe they take it from the perspective of, we need to groom more men for this field, and it's our responsibility in our community to do so. So we've broken down the talking points in those ways. Through the kind of the piloting of some of this material, one really effective way was that we had some board members of local mentoring programs that hosted house parties. So they would agree to kind of have a group of their friends over, and whether it was a card night or to watch a football game or whatever, they'd agree to have some food and invite people over, and then they would, make it their mission and their goal for that event to recruit those individuals to become mentors. And we had a great deal of success with some of those types of things, and that's why hopefully some of these talking points can be helpful to you to get those out to some of those people to help make the ask. And I think a lot of times we found our best recruiters are those male volunteers that are currently doing it for you, that are already your mentors, and they can help connect you to other people in their network that might also be good volunteers. I think sometimes we're, and rightfully so cautious of asking too much of our mentors and our volunteers, but they're our best representatives of our program, and they're the ones who can make some of this so personal because they've seen the impact. They know that it's easy, although we know it's not always easy, but they've been successful in doing it, and they can tell that story to their friends and their family and their coworkers and their church groups, and they wouldn't be volunteering for you and they wouldn't be serving as a mentor for you if they didn't believe in this. And so quite often we found they've been very successful in recruiting as well.
And it's National Mentoring Month, so those are great ideas. And Esther had an idea that she shared earlier that I missed when I came in after and kind of moved along here. But thinking about how do you use your current mentors, but she said that their program is making buttons for mentors to wear to help them be ambassadors, as well as having their mentors write on their blogs and using that social media to help get that word out. And somebody else just added, I mean, this is the, I think this is really the reality of, and LaVon said, I've had to just put myself out there and just ask random people and to be, to be armed with some toolkit items and talking points like this is really helpful. You never know where you're going to run into somebody.
Absolutely, and the more you can educate your volunteers with some of these talking points too, because whether it's happening formally or not, your volunteers are out talking about their experience. I mean, I'm a volunteer for a program here locally, and when I'm talking to my friends and family about my week or my day, I always mention that experience. And so if you give them a few talking points and educate them about how to make an ask, or say, all right, great, can I pass your contact information on to my case manager? They'll get in touch with you. You'd be a great volunteer. Like, help them take the next step, because they're already having these conversations.
Great.
Other questions right now, April?
Just a comment of the Big Brothers Big Sisters mission of 100 men in 100 days was all grassroots recruitment, just pounding the pavement, and it worked great. And Esther also says, go LaVon. So I have to mention that. There's a lot of people out here who know each other.
our Big Brothers Big Sisters programs here in Michigan have had a lot of success with that as well. And I think, we talk about this in some points within our toolkit too, but, men want to understand the need, and they like setting goals and meeting goals and being successful, and to be part of a campaign is quite often very appealing to men to say, I'm going to be part of this 100 men in 100 days, and it's been a great way to recruit men as well.
Yeah, and I left this slide up here. Just I wondered if you wanted to emphasize. I mean, these are some great pieces and helps us tell that story about how relationships take time to develop, and it's not a really quick fix, and which can be hard to hard to share when you're trying to recruit and when somebody's trying to have a big impact. But these are some one of my favorite slides. So
yeah, we want to define success in a way that's realistic for these volunteers, and we want to assure these men that success is attainable, and we want to describe to them what this success means in the context of mentoring. We all know mentoring isn't a quick fix, and these relationships do take time, as do these positive outcomes in the young people that we want to see. So, a couple of the bullet points on the slide: success is not what you accomplish. While many youth experienced increased academic and social behaviors, these results are often not immediate. And what success is being there, someone a young person can go to when life throws them a curveball or when there's an occasion to celebrate. And a lot of times when we're promoting mentoring, we're talking about, we see kids in our mentoring programs go from F's to B's and C's, and I think sometimes our volunteers after a few weeks are like, my mentee's not seeing that great improvement. I must not be successful, or where is my relationship going wrong, or their behavior is still kind of going downhill, and we thought it was going to improve. I mean, this is not an overnight success, but we got to just be really clear on how we're defining it so it's attainable for our volunteers.
I mean, that's an important thing for the field in general, and thinking about, I mean, wouldn't it be great if our funders defined success this way? Some do, but, some do not. And, all right, that's a little soapbox piece, but, all right, so we just have a couple more things here, Amber, if you want to run through them. We do have one of our male participants shared that they have a men-specific recruitment message called Real Men Are Mentors. So just wanted to mention that. Okay.
Very cool. So like we said, we have to make sure we close and that we make the ask. So ultimately at the end of this is a sales pitch. So are they going to buy or not? And kind of creating this awareness alone really doesn't recruit new mentors. So the candidate has to be asked directly if they would like to be a mentor. And they will expect to be asked. If you're talking to them about all of this stuff, they're expecting that the ask is coming. And this should be done in a direct and, if possible, face-to-face conversation. The more personal the conversation, the more likely you are to recruit that new mentor. And the more specific you are about asking for that commitment, the better. The ask that you make of the candidate ultimately will depend on the readiness of that particular candidate. And again, this underscores that importance of listening and engaging in conversations so you understand where that person is at. And then the next slide provides you with a few of those examples. But I'm going to go ahead and move on to overcoming.
Yeah, I was just going to mention too that I was approached by somebody from the corporate community who's working a lot with mentoring though too after our conference about and he had presented a great idea at our conference, but he's sometime in 2011 really interested in doing a workshop for mentoring, kind of frontline mentoring staff on how to do that, sort of practicing how do you make the ask and how do you do that sales pitch, and that we kind of can read it and we know it, and that's where I think the audio podcast so you can hear what it sounds like and kind of practice
Yeah.
it yourself. So it's something that I hope to follow through on here in 2011.
Yeah, we've started offering some workshops like that at our annual statewide conference as well, and I think so many of us that are in this field are more from the social work type background, and this isn't necessarily an area that we're comfortable in, because, you know, it is about being direct and, you know, getting people to sign up and getting a yes out of people, and, you know, you're making a sale. Luckily, we're making sales about things that we're passionate about and are making a positive impact, but ultimately, at the end of the day, we're selling them on our program. So it can be challenging. But we mentioned a little bit earlier that there's going to be some objections and concerns from the volunteers, so we need to be prepared about how to deal with that. So, you know, through these conversations, you should be learning what their potential objectives are, and you should be prepared to overcome those. So you don't hear no from your qualified candidates, and because most of their concerns you can address. So be prepared in advance, know what the common objections are, and be prepared with solutions. So, for example, how many of you have ever heard this objection? It sounds like a great program, but I just don't know if I have enough time. So how might you respond to that? And we give you some examples of the toolkit. So one example of how you might overcome that objection successfully, you could say something like, I certainly understand we are all busy people, and I know that you're already giving some of your time by being here today, but one thing to think about is that you don't have to create an additional hour every week. We all know that there are only so many hours in each day and each week. What you can do is include someone else in the activities you're already doing. So take a young man with you to the YMCA to shoot hoops or work out. Take a young man to AutoZone if you need to pick up supplies to work on your car. Maybe take him to Home Depot to pick up some supplies to do some work on your home over the weekend. Just give some really specific examples about those objections, and we go into some others throughout the toolkit as well.
Mm-hmm.
And then, yeah, we kind of started to hit on this slide already about the additional resources. This is how our toolkit is broken down. And then there's not only the PDF versions of the talking points, but there's the audio podcast as well. And April's showing one of the examples of one of the PDF documents on the screen now.
You know, and I'm going to just switch back over to, there you are again. There's Amber. So in the follow-up email that you'll get, we'll send a direct link so you can get to the full array of resources that are available for the Men in Mentoring Toolkit. And really, you know, this webinar, we've got, you know, some great ideas from participants and heard a lot from Amber, but to make sure that our programs are aware that this great toolkit exists, it's free, you can access it at any time, and you know, we'll make sure that you know that. In addition, from our through our QMAP, the Quality Mentoring Assessment Path, I just went in and pulled some of the recruitment resources that we've gathered there, and so these will also be available to you in that follow-up email. But I mean, I've got pages of different, you know, recruitment tips or guides for setting up a recruitment plan, or just from lots of different organizations that you can look at to find some ways to do some recruitment and to apply those things. Those aren't all male recruitment specific, but at least if you're kind of getting started or thinking about how to improve your recruitment plan for 2011, those resources are there. And again, this presentation and others are available at SlideShare. Again, you'll get a follow-up email that will include all of this, so you can, you know, not worry too much about that. It just want to respect the time and kind of officially end, but if anybody has last questions or things, you can linger or type those in for us. Otherwise, just look forward to that follow-up email this afternoon to get some more resources. Thank you, Amber and Mentor Michigan, for providing such a great tool, and for the Kellogg Foundation for funding that. And so it's being used and has been featured all over the country, and hopefully lots of our Minnesota programs will access it now if they haven't already. Our next, go ahead.
I was just going to say, feel free to be in touch with us here in Michigan. I know you guys are kind of looking for a network as well to bounce around ideas. We have some programs that have been successful and I know are willing to talk about it. I know a lot of this may seem like, yeah, I already knew that, but hopefully through this toolkit you'll see things in maybe a more well-organized way, or uses some language that hadn't occurred to you and makes you think a little bit differently about your specific audiences.
Absolutely. Our next Quality and Action webinar, February 2nd, 2011. I am pretty sure the topic will be preparing mentees for mentoring. We want to feature some tools that we've created, but they include video, and so we're trying to work out the technical issues of how we can show that video through the webinar. So we want to be sure to maximize that. So if not that, another wonderful topic will be there. All right, and I think I'm going to have a couple questions that I'm going to respond to kind of offline here, but I don't see any others. All right, well, happy National Mentoring Month. Good luck with your recruitment this month and throughout the year. We look forward to hearing from you and having you participate in future Quality and Action webinars. And thanks again to Amber.
Thank you, April. Bye-bye.
Bye.